Hello everyone, and welcome to our follow-up on learning targets. A quick review on why we use learning targets. First of all, learning targets guide learning. They describe, in language that students understand, the lesson-sized chunk of information, skills, and reasoning processes that students need to know. We write learning targets from the student's point of view and share them throughout the lesson so that students can use them to guide their own learning. We use learning targets to guide formative assessment. Remember that built into the language of the learning target, there should be a measurable skill or chunk of knowledge for which students can demonstrate their proficiency. During the lesson, teachers should be collecting formative assessment data that gives evidence of that proficiency and can help you adjust your teaching so that you know students are mastering the content. Also, don't miss out on opportunities for students to self-report their progress. It can be formally collected, like is done in the science department with their student self-reported grades, or you can use any number of informal methods to gather this data, from student reflection questions to short diagnostic quizzes that minimally impact student grades, to exit tickets or surveys of the class using sites like todaysmeet.com or pollcode.com. Some key components in a learning target. First of all, keep them specific. A learning target is the new knowledge, reasoning, skills, or product that students can demonstrate at the end of the class. Make sure the target is measurable. As you're writing targets, ask the question, how will I know students have met the target? And don't forget the action verb. Always try to work your way up blooms as you progress through a unit, develop more complex understandings, and reflect it in the verbiage of the learning target. Remember from our last training to think about where the target falls in the unit. Is it early skills or knowledge that will be lower in blooms? Is it somewhere in the middle? Or more towards the end, where ideally students will be asked to demonstrate higher order learning? It's sometimes helpful to think about the different types of learning targets you might write. There are knowledge targets, reasoning targets, performance or skill targets, and product targets. With knowledge targets, the goal is mastery of substantive subject content, where mastery includes both knowing and understanding. Take a moment to look at some examples of knowledge targets. Reasoning targets are those that ask students to use knowledge and understanding to solve problems. Take a moment to look at examples of reasoning targets. Performance or skill targets involve students doing something where process is what's being assessed. Here are some examples. Finally, product targets are targets where the product is tangible and meets some standard of quality through concrete evidence. Here are some examples. At Tuesday's staff meeting, we'll spend our time reviewing learning targets in your PLC teams. Please bring examples of learning targets from your classes to the staff meeting. Also bring your laptop for access to your curriculum maps. Bring a target from the beginning of a unit, from the middle of a unit, and from the end of a unit. In your PLCs, look over each person's targets and see if they meet all of the criteria for effective learning targets from the next slide in this presentation. I'll have that slide up on the projector at our staff meeting, as well as printed copies of the Bloom's verbs for reference, so that you can look at the Bloom level of each target and see if it is appropriate. A final note, while not required, as we talked about in our last learning target session, it might be helpful if members in your PLC are keeping track of the learning targets they use this year, so they can be included in the next phase of curriculum mapping. And with that, see you Tuesday.